Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest stream. Today, we're going to be providing pre-election day coverage of New Jersey, which is coming up. You've got me, Harrison, here, along with Ethan, our two New Jersey experts for Elections Daily, and we're going to be covering the races come Election Day on November 2nd. So I'm basically going to be going through each of the key races we'll cover. I'll provide a little brief explanation about who the candidates are, some of the campaign dynamics, and then I'll throw it to Ethan, who will have just as much say and be able to give his feedback on each race. And we've come to similar opinions on the race ratings, which we also have. If there are any errors, they'll be corrected before the final article I'm writing goes out. But yeah, very happy to have you all watching. Happy to have Ethan here tonight. So without further ado, we will begin by taking a look at the governor's race, which we currently rate as likely Democratic. As you all know, since this is pretty much the only race you'll be following in New Jersey, if you're a novice, former Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli is the Republican nominee. Former State Senator Diane Allen is his running mate for Lieutenant Governor. And the ticket is challenging Governor Phil Murphy and Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver. And together, if Murphy's ticket wins, as we expect it to, he will be the first sitting governor in 44 years since Bradley Byrne in 1977 to be able to win re-election successfully. That said, this race seems to have come onto the radar more and drawn some more attention in the last few weeks with polling that has shown a little bit of tightening in the race. Usually Democrats in the state tend to win by about the same inelastic margin. Murphy won by 14 points against Kim Guadagno, the lieutenant governor, last time. But we expect it to be more in the likely Democratic ballpark than the safe ballpark. And all we mean by that is that Murphy is still the favorite, but we don't quite expect it to be a victory by more than last time. We're thinking more in the range of 8 to 12 points this time for margin, rather than anywhere from 10 to 15 or 14 like the Guadagno race. Some of the polls in the last few weeks, particularly since the second NJ Spotlight debate, Ciattarelli and Murphy have largely been focusing on the same topics. Taxes, always an issue that Republican candidates hold against Democratic governors. Essentially the foil of Governor Florio and Governor Corzine in both of their losing campaigns. Doesn't seem to be hurting Murphy as much, but Ciattarelli has really run ads pointing out if taxes are your issue, then Phil Murphy is not your governor and this is not your state, because he's been knocking Phil Murphy for saying that. That was a big debate issue. Vaccine mandates, another big debate issue. Ciattarelli's in favor of vaccines but doesn't support a vaccine mandate like Phil Murphy has pushed for in the state and will likely continue to follow through on if reelected. And other issues pretty much have just been dealing with, general Democratic and Republican dichotomy campaign issues. They've talked about racial justice and systemic racism at the last debate. They talked about school independence, kind of mimicking Virginia, although not emphasizing critical race theory as much. Really overall, it's just been a balanced local campaign. A lot of talk about fiscal issues, cutting the budget, fixing the pension system, balancing the school payment formula for the state. And it's been an interesting campaign, to say the least, one that has certainly become more divisive. Before I throw it to Ethan, I'm just going to reiterate we have our likely Democratic rating here. The most recent poll in the race was a bit of an outlier. It was the Emerson College poll, and it showed Governor Murphy leading overall by 6 points, 50 to 44. But similar polling data has also shown with likely voters that Murphy's only up 48 to 46 over Ciattarelli, which would make the race pretty competitive. If you look at the 2018 Senate race, Emerson underestimated Bob Menendez by about 4 or 5 points or so. So we still think that a 6-point Emerson poll lead, coupled with the Stockton poll that showed a 9-point lead, and coupled hopefully with one more Monmouth poll, the gold standard for New Jersey statewide polls, we'll be able to show somewhere in the ballpark of, again, an 8 to 12-point Murphy lead, likely Democratic race. Could be closer than that, could be larger victory than that, but somewhere within that ballpark is what we're expecting, and we're looking forward to that last Monmouth poll. So, Ethan, what are your thoughts briefly on the governor's race?
My brief side, we don't have much polling, but of the polling we do have, it certainly seems to show a tightened race from the summer. So, in the summer, we regularly got polls that showed Murphy up like mid double digits or even high double digits. 15 points, 19 points, something like that. In the last 2 months, we've received four non-internal polls. They show according to 538 with the likely voter models, you see Murphy plus 13, Murphy plus 9, Murphy plus 9, and most recently, Murphy plus 4 for Emerson College using their likely voter model. And this probably correlates with Biden's sinking approval numbers nationwide. Probably hurts Democratic candidates everywhere, but this is still a pretty blue state. And we expect Murphy to pull it out, but it seems like at the moment it's going to be reduced from his 14% win in 2017, when in the wake of an unpopular, to say the least, Republican governor and Trump and President Trump in the White House.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, again, we're still predicting a Murphy victory, still a comfortable victory, but a single-digit victory, I think, is looking increasingly more likely than it did over the summer. And I think there's some parity here between the New Jersey's governor's race and the Virginia race, tightening per se. Obviously, Republicans have a significantly higher chance of winning the Virginia governor's race, in which McAuliffe, we believe, is still favored, but I'll leave that to our Virginia team. But, you have seen this tightening. And I read on the New Jersey Globe the other day, if I remember correctly, that Biden's approval is something at around 53-44 approve in New Jersey, which for a significantly blue state like this is somewhat mediocre, but not mediocre enough to be a huge drag, per se, on Governor Murphy in the same way that Trump's unpopularity and Governor Christie's unpopularity really dragged down a moderate like Kim Guadagno, someone who on paper otherwise was a good candidate. So that's the governor's race for now, and we'll have more detailed looks at how each county is going to vote. We've been thinking about rating counties as well. You have some interesting possibilities down the ballot. Will Murphy do as well in South Jersey this time around as he did last time? Will Jack Chitterelli, who represented the Zwicker Assembly seat previously in one of the rare instances of a split party outcome in an assembly delegation, be able to do better in Somerset County and, hold Murphy to a slim margin of victory like Guadagno did? Or will the Somerset results look more like a federal race and less like a down ballot race where Republicans usually have some strength? But we'll get into all of that. Without further ado, though, we're going to be moving on to the Senate, because we have a ton of fascinating races for Senate. And in the interest of time, we're going to spend like 2 minutes on them. I'll just do a short 30-second introduction, throw it to Ethan for additional thoughts, and we'll run through each seat. So first off, we're starting with a reach seat. It's one of 4 reach seats that we're going to be focusing on in the Senate. We rate it as safe Republican, but it was fairly recently held by Democrats. That's the 1st legislative district. And as you know, New Jersey uses the same districts for the Senate and the Assembly. And the 1st takes in Cape May, all of Cape May County, and portions of Atlantic and Cumberland counties. It is a Republican Trump district, historically Democratic. It's represented by Senator Mike Testa, a Republican who won a special election here in 2019 with 53% of the vote. In that race, he defeated Bob Andrzejczak, who was the interim senator. Andrzejczak was appointed by the Democrats to fill the seat, which was previously held by Jeff Van Drew. And as you know, Van Drew, once a conservative Democrat, pro-gun, anti-gay marriage, usually put up solid margins in his re-elections in his South Jersey district. He won Frank LoBiondo's seat in Congress, and now he is a Republican. But then he was a Democrat. Republicans flipped the Senate seat. They also flipped both assembly seats in the 1st district. The Democrat here is Yolanda Garcia Baliki, an attorney. Again, this is a reach Dem target, not being seriously contested by the Democrats, I'm sure, as Ethan will mention. I just felt like putting it on here because, it was recently held by Democrats, and for a long time it was very Democratic down the ballot in our legislative elections. So, Ethan, any thoughts here?
Yeah. So fun thing about this district, this is one of the few districts we actually have some legislative polling on. Stockton University did a released a poll about 10 days ago for the district. So, for some context, yeah, this used to be held by now Republican Jeff Van Drew, who won this district by 31 points, I think, actually, in 2017.
Yeah, his last election was his largest.
Yeah, 31%. And Phil Murphy actually narrowly carried this district in 2017 by 0.4%. Things have changed. So this district went for Trump by 6 points in 2020, and the Stockton University's poll, unsurprisingly, shows incumbent Republican Mike Testo leading by 13 points. Not surprising, given that Democrats have completely given up on this district after getting crushed in 2019.
Did the poll take a look at the Simonson McClellan assembly race too?
Yeah, it does. So it shows Simonson and McClellan combined to have 40%, and the Democrats combined to have 29%. So 19-point lead in aggregate. The most interesting thing here for me, although we'll have to see how accurate this turns out, is that Jack Ciattarelli is only leading Phil Murphy in this poll by 2% in this district, which would be a downgrade from 2017 when Murphy barely carried it. But it's just one data point showing that the down ballot Democratic lean for South Jersey might hold up a bit, not enough to carry the district or make it even more competitive, but it's something interesting to look at.
And
but
again, like I mentioned earlier,
completely uncompetitive.
Yeah, something we're talking about as well. Again, we're going to look both ways. I want to see how much down ballot strength Ciattarelli has in now Democratic counties like Somerset. And again, in districts like this legislative district, how well is Murphy going to do? That's something we're going to be watching. You'd think that if Ciattarelli is doing better overall, he'd be doing better here. But, if Murphy can still perform markedly better than Joe Biden, that could help some legislative Democrats, at least in more competitive seats like the second, which goes perfectly into what we're talking about. The second Senate district, unlike the first, is a Biden district. Voted for Biden by 10.7 points, about 11 points. It's entirely based in Atlantic County. And unlike the first district, it actually has some Democratic anchors, if you will, that make it Democratic. One of them is Egg Harbor Township, fairly reliably Democratic, but to a greater extent, obviously Atlantic City and Pleasantville. And although Pleasantville has a slightly smaller population than Egg Harbor Township and Atlantic City, Pleasantville is over 90% minority if you combine the Hispanic and Black populations there. So again, the rest of the district, it's potable for Republicans, but there are some important Democratic communities here that make it markedly Democratic on paper. A little bit of background on this district. It is, or was, you could say, held by Republican Chris Brown, moderate Republican. He beat, let's go back a little further. So it was held by a Democrat named Jim Whalen, and Jim Whalen died. And a guy named Chris Bell was appointed as the interim senator here. And he lost in 2017 to a moderate Republican named Chris Brown. Very similar margin to the Testa-Andrechek race, 53-47 or so. But suffice to say, he resigned earlier this year to take up a position in the Murphy administration, which opened up the seat. Republicans chose former Assemblyman Vince Palestina to be interim senator. He's also the Republican candidate, but there's been a lot of controversy regarding his seating here. In the recent debate hosted by Mike Rasmussen and David Wildstein with the NJ Globe, they touched on it twice to talk about it. So the fascinating thing with this district is, as Palestina mentioned, he believes the Senate rules, state constitution mean that he is going to be the senator, and he will. Wildstein pointed out that next month, regardless of the election outcome, at least from next month until the start of the new term, Palestina will be the senator. But Palestina has not officially been seated by Democratic leadership in the Senate. And he pointed that out as a very bad thing in the debate. He said they locked the Brown office. He was unable to answer phone calls, respond to constituents, called it partisan politics, everything you'd be able to think about rife in a New Jersey campaign, essentially. Vince Mazzeo, his Senate opponent, one of the two assemblymen from this district, he was asked about it as well, but he just pointed out he thought that Palestina was the official senator by letterhead in the debate, and he pointed out how he has no control over what the Senate president decides to do, and that Palestina will eventually become a senator. But until then, you have a very competitive toss-up race with some nice down-ballot Republican trends shaping up in a Biden plus 11 seat between Palestina and Vince Mazzeo, one of the two assemblymen, along with John Armato. The campaign is focused on a lot of local issues, as you'd expect. One of them deals with the casinos, which are very important to Atlantic City and the tourism industry, and just general economic development in Atlantic County, which Assemblyman Mazzeo pointed out to some extent had come about as a result of kind of a mix between Atlantic city control, county level government, and state government, looking at property tax relief and what they actually call essentially the payment in lieu of taxes program, which essentially allows different taxpayers to pay different property tax rates. So you have this kind of dichotomy between a normal taxpayer and a casino, for example. And, the two debated slightly on that, with Palestina more talking that everybody should pay their fair share and that we should redo the school funding formula to reduce property taxes. Mazzeo just arguing the typical Democratic stances there. They also both agreed that they would likely vote to confirm Murphy's recent Supreme Court nomination as well. So, Ethan, thoughts on this race?
Yeah. So while this district is in South Jersey and did go double digits for both Clinton, Murphy, and Biden, this is I'm not sure if I call it ancestrally Republican, but it definitely has quite a few Republican tendencies down ballot. So despite that top line, so while Murphy carried this district by 17 points, as Harrison stated, Chris Brown, who was then assemblyman, flipped the district by 7 points. So we don't really expect the Murphy margin to be as indicative of what will happen down ballot here, because there's historically been a lot of splitting here. Chris Brown and Vince Mazzeo were the two assemblymen from this district for almost a decade.
Yeah.
The Republican and the Democrat split delegation for a very long time. So we expect this to come down to local issues, and this is one of the most competitive races in the entire state. One of our two toss-ups.
Yeah, for now, one of our two toss-ups. And like Ethan said, Atlantic County does have a lot of down-ballot Republican office holders, even though it's Democratic at the federal level and the state level as well, one could say. But we'll be moving on now.
Actually, I'd like to point out one last thing here.
Sure. Go ahead.
This is some of you might know of the South Jersey Democratic Machine team. This is people call New Jersey a machine state, and this area is a big part of why. So the South Jersey Democratic Machine has poured in billions into a few districts, one of which is this one. Reason being, they back their own. Vince Mazzeo is a part of that machine. They've dumped in I believe 600,000 plus Mazzeo plus Audio's 180,000 compared to Palestina's 300,000. Now we don't use that to say whoever has most money is gonna do best. But you can tell by how much money someone's put into a district how competitive they think it is. So even if you think, it's double digits for Biden, it's gonna go for Democrats. No, there's a reason outside groups are pouring tons of money here. They think it's competitive. But yeah.
Exactly. And you can never just look. It's very bad to just in New Jersey, especially, it might be a novice mistake to look and say, this district's double-digit Biden, it's gone. Republicans aren't winning it. But as you'll see, an even better example, this one could go either way, but we actually consider John Bramnick a slight favorite in the 21st district race to replace Tom Kean, and that seat is far bluer than this one. We're talking about, if I believe, it's Biden plus 18,
yep.
Which makes it essentially the second most difficult seat by just raw partisanship to hold for Republicans after the 16th, which is an open seat. But we'll be moving on to the 3rd district. This is a pretty brief thing to talk about. You all should know Steve Sweeney, future potential gubernatorial candidate, Senate president, the foil of Republicans and progressive Democrats alike, someone who arguably I wouldn't even say arguably, definitely had a better relationship with Governor Christie than he does with Governor Murphy. He's held this district. It's a Trump district on paper. It includes a bit of Gloucester, but most all of Salem, and then a big portion of Cumberland County as well. Voted for Trump by about 2 points. Like the rest of South Jersey, especially at the federal level, definitely starting to leach towards the right. But he's held it reliably. He won his first Senate election here in 2001 against a reverse Jeff Van Drew. It was a guy named Raymond Zane, and he was a Democrat forever, and he switched to the Republicans. And right after making the switch, he lost a close race to Sweeney. Sweeney hasn't had a close or severely contested race since then. He's Sweeney. And Republicans, as Ethan will mention with fundraising, have not been targeting this district, even though it's winnable on paper. They actually nominated a guy. They nominated a guy here named Edward Durr, who's a truck driver, commercial truck driver. So compared to some of their other candidate recruitment spots in these other close Senate races, not the first candidate you'd think of. We rate it as likely Democratic. It's close to safe Democratic. We'd be very surprised if Sweeney somehow did not win by double digits. And Sweeney somehow losing would be such a ridiculous upset. I don't even know what. That would break New Jersey politics, to put it simply. So good district for Republicans on paper, unlike some of the other reach districts that they have been looking at, as we'll talk about later. But, powerful incumbent, mediocre, pretty much nobody candidate. Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah. So just to give an idea of how much Republicans are trying this district, I believe the latest campaign finance report showed they raised a combined total of $100 for this district. Literally 100, compared to Sweeney, who had, I believe, for his campaign account alone, a mere 1.3 million, plus 1.3 million for the district as a total. Now, part of this is that back in 2017, the teachers union in New Jersey, which usually backs Democrats, tried really, really hard to get Sweeney out of office because he was supporting pension reform. They spent it was the most expensive legislative race up to that point, I believe, something like $8 million or maybe $20 million, something ridiculous. And Sweeney won by one of his largest margins yet as a result, 17.5%. And so the Republicans seem to just they don't really feel like competing against that firepower, it seems, because Sweeney's one of the heads of the South Jersey Democratic machine. They will match whatever money you put in like tenfold. So Republicans seem to be deciding to leave Sweeney alone, focus on some more favorable district to them, so like the 2nd and the 8th district. And we expect Sweeney to win pretty comfortably here. It's also very notable that this is a more Democratic district down ballot. So, for instance, Murphy won this district by 8 points last time in 2017. He may lose it this time. He may win it, but it's certainly not. But yeah, this is one of the more down ballot Democratic districts, and with this big of an imbalance and Republicans blatantly not trying, we expect Democrats to cruise.
Yeah, again, I mean, the only reason this is not safe Democratic, just an abundance of caution type thing, but it is not a race we expect Republicans to be competitive in, despite the fact that the district is certainly one Republicans could win. And depending on how redistricting eventually goes and when Sweeney retires, he's been posed as a potential candidate for governor, along with Mikey Sherrill and Vin Gopal. Then Republicans could consider winning this seat. But it's been 2 decades since they last held it. And even then, that was a party switch. So, the next is the 8th district, our other marquee race, also a toss-up. And we will be making picks in the 2nd and 8th districts before the election in the final article that I put out after I confer with Ethan. But for now, it's a toss-up. It'll probably end up being a coin flip. But the race here is in a Biden +7 district that includes Atlantic, Burlington, and Camden counties. A significant portion of Burlington. And it's not as Democratic on paper if you look at presidential top line as the 2nd district, but still, like many close districts in New Jersey, almost all of them, it has a Democratic lean. And it's represented by an incumbent Democrat named Dawn Maria Diego. I probably am saying her name wrong, but she's someone that's been in New Jersey politics for a while. She was elected in 2011 as a Republican, reelected in 2017 as a Republican, switched to the Democrats in 2019, attempting to read the tea leaves of the district, if you will, which could be wise. We'll see. This is the chance to see whether or not the party switch paid off. But she's being challenged by a former sheriff and current Assemblywoman Jean Stanfield, certainly a very good Republican recruit for the district. She had a competitive race last time as a Republican, and it's going to be a difficult race for her to win this time. It's one of the toss-up races because you have a solid Republican candidate, a good matchup, just like you have in the 2nd district, and you have a district that, again, on paper, even though it might not be very competitive federally, is certainly competitive down the ballot in New Jersey. So this is going to be a core contest to watch. And I guess I'll have Ethan maybe add some coloring in here on the finances, because this is another high spending district like the 2nd, because it's essentially the top. There are 2 targets that are at the top of everybody's list for both campaign committees in the Senate, and this is one of them.
Yep. Before I get to that, just like a brief history. Democrats targeted this district quite heavily in 2019 for the assembly seats, and they came up pretty short in both of them. Combined vote was about 3% more Republican than the Democrats in 2019. So this while this is like sort of Democratic on the top of the ballot, so they went for Clinton by 2%, Biden by 7%. I don't believe Democrats have won a seat in this district for decades. So Ad Diego's victory, if she wins, would be one of the first in decades. As such, with her switch, she gets the backing of the South Jersey Democratic machine, pouring over $1 million into her campaign. Now, the Republicans aren't really slacking either. They're putting up what money they have as well. But yeah, there's a giant cash imbalance in this district. Ad Diego's Stanfield's 100,000 Stanfield's 100,000 to Ad Diego's like over $1 million. But again, money isn't super determinative. But you can tell by money that which districts that parties are definitely targeting think are most competitive.
Yeah, if it does determine one thing, it determines that the 2nd and the 8th are the top targets for both party committees, as I said, in the Senate this year. And the assembly seats in the 2nd and 8th districts also are going to be hotly targeted as well in the assembly campaign, as we'll get to. But now we move on to the first reach seat, if you will, for the GOP. New political reporter for the New Jersey Globe, Joey Fox, is truly a very talented person. I'm very, very impressed so far by the articles that have come out of the Globe on that. One of the articles was taking a look at reach seats and where Democrats are not impressed by Republican attempts at reach seats. And there are 3 of those reach seats. The 11th district, the 14th district, and the 38th district. So, we'll start and we'll take a look at that. First, I want to address a comment. We're going to be going through LD21 in more detail in a second. We're going in order by number, so we're going to briefly talk about 11. 11th district is entirely in Monmouth County. It's a Republican county overall, but the 11th is a Democratic district. It has some Democratic communities like Long Branch and Asbury Park. Vin Gopal, who wants to run for governor and has raised quite a lot of money and doled it out to other Democratic candidates to build connections in the legislature ahead of a potential campaign. He is from Long Branch. So again, it's an interesting district. It's very similar to the 2nd, voted for Biden by around 11 points. Gopal defeated Jennifer Beck in 2017. She was the incumbent Republican senator. She herself, a couple cycles earlier, beat a Democratic senator, but Gopal beat Beck by almost 8 points. It wasn't even close. And that was one of the incumbent casualties last time around. Beck's not running again. This time Republicans are running Lori Annetta, a businesswoman, against Gopal. To me, so far, if you look at Republican strategy, it seems the Republicans are targeting the assembly seats here more. They think they have a better shot at that campaign. To reflect that difference, at least for now, I've kept a lean Democratic rating for the assembly seats and a likely Democratic rating for the Senate seat. And I'm sure you want to talk about this, Ethan, but Vin Gopal, again, is a fundraising king.
Yeah, his campaign currently had raised in the like in the last few months, $440,000. So, and compared to the Republican candidate for Senate, which is only 20,000, Republicans, if they're trying somewhere, it seems to be Assembly. Reportedly, Gopal seems to be pretty popular in the district. He's considering. People saying he's considering a run for maybe governor after Phil Murphy in like 2025 or something. And something notable about this district, another one of the historically more down ballot Republican districts until Democrats flipped it in 2015, 2017. Only went for Murphy by 3%, although part of that might be because Kim Guadagno, what used to be a countywide office holder in Monmouth County, so she might have gotten a big boost here. In any case, Republicans, if they're contesting anything, it's going to be the assembly seats here. There's a giant caste differential for the Senate. So yeah.
I mean, it's big. Vin Gopal's probably going to win pretty easily. He already beat Beck fairly easily as an incumbent last time. And frankly, again, it's a reach seat. Democrats are not impressed. Republicans have not raised very much money for the seat. And as the Fox article talked about, this seat is just one where Scharfenberger, who's running essentially the campaigns for the Republicans on the Senate side, he was looking at this district, and if I remember to paraphrase off the top of my head, he was pointing out how it's fundamentally on paper a swing district down ballot, how Beck, as recently as prior to 2017, held the district, but again, seems to be the type of district that's moving away from Republicans at both levels. And, one where, as I mentioned, you have some pretty set Democratic communities, like Asbury Park, Ocean, Long Branch, Neptune. Really, Freehold is the only one I can think of that is more of a Republican bastion in the district. The next Senate seat is another one of the reach seats mentioned in the article. We don't expect it to be competitive, but we have it on here because Scharfenberger mentioned it as a race that Republicans are going to take a look at. Although they have not raised very much money here at all. The only one where they raised less money, I believe their candidate in the 38th district only raised $0. A great sum. But again, Scharfenberger in the article Fox was writing about talked a lot about how Greenstein's district, on paper, it's not ridiculously Democratic. It has a definite Democratic lean, certainly a Biden district. Townships like Hamilton in Mercer and Monroe in Middlesex, both very important. The two of them are reliably Democratic, but not overwhelmingly Democratic. Greenstein had a close race. The article, I'll copy the article for you. I just saw a comment here. This talks about earlier this year about 3 of the seats Republicans were trying to expand into. But again, this is a Mercer County-based seat with the other half in Middlesex. It takes in a lot of Trenton suburbs. In the article as well, Scharfenberger was talking about how he thinks Republicans can appeal to a lot of federally, or I guess you could say state government-employed workers and suburbanites outside of Trenton, in Hamilton Township that could vote Republican. The Republican candidate here against Greenstein is a Republican named Adam Elias. We rated as safe Democratic. Senator Greenstein won fairly easily last time around. She hasn't had a competitive race since 2013. I think that's part of why Republicans are targeting the seat. But even in 2013, she only won by 2 points. But Chris Christie was, as you know, winning the state in a landslide and winning her district by 63%. Or with 63% of the vote. So if she could survive under those conditions, we really don't expect this to be the race Republicans contest. We're only mentioning these reach races just because they're interesting, and both party campaigns think, why not just target this to gain some ground? But again, Democrats not very impressed.
Yeah, funny thing about this district. So, first things first, it is a district that only went for Phil Murphy by 7 points. So although it went for Biden by like 17. So you can see why you might want to, why you would like to target this district. And indeed, this is actually Elias or Elias, however you pronounce it, actually did raise a decent chunk of money in that he loaned his own campaign $90,000 from himself. So he might have some funds around, but
Yeah.
it's it's actually it's Bible 17, which actually makes it less blue than nearby LD21. But this is the area that's just less Republican down ballot. So we rate it safe Democratic. We don't expect it to be competitive, but in a good Republican year, they could make this close. And if they targeted him a lot, they might have been able to contest this.
Yeah, and again, these reach seats are on here because it's either we have a standard election or maybe Republicans do perform better than expected, which would be a bad harbinger. It's certainly not auspicious for the midterm chances next year in general for the party. But these reach seats are the seats that are going to be a bit closer than expected for the Democrats if Republicans have a very good night in the legislature and in the governor's race. And by very good night, I mean Ciattarelli coming close to winning. So certainly single digits, 5-6 points. That would be very good for down ballot Republicans. They wouldn't have to outrun the top of the ticket as much to win their races. The next race is the 16th district. It includes Princeton, which people from outside New Jersey are always shocked when I tell them that Princeton's represented by a Republican in the legislature. But it includes little bits of Hunterdon, Mercer, Middlesex, and Somerset counties. Also includes Somerville. And this is a seat that's very interesting because Ciattarelli actually represented it. Made a map earlier, but back in 2015, you had 2 Republicans originally representing the seat, like many of the other seats in the region, ancestrally Republican. And as we'll get into with the assembly races, Donna Simon narrowly won a special election against a Democrat named Mary Corfield in 2012 to win the seat standalone. And then Ciattarelli was the other assembly person. Now, this is one of the rare instances in which an assembly seat elected a Republican and a Democrat as its 2 members. Normally, since we have 2 members in a close race, you'll see both members of one party finish ahead of both members of the other party. But in this case, you saw Ciattarelli hold his seat, but Simon lost, came in 3rd place, and Andrew Zwicker, who's now running for Senate, finished in 2nd. Ciattarelli eventually retired, and the other seat went to Roy Fryman. So looking at this district, we currently rate it for the Senate as likely Democratic. We expect a flip here. It could be closer than that if Republicans have a good night, but ultimately, regardless of the rating, the outcome prediction remains the same. We believe Assemblyman Andrew Zwicker will win this seat. It's Biden plus 21. So it's the bluest seat that Republicans are defending in the legislature. And it is held by Republican Kit Bateman. He's from a political family like Tom Kaine. His dad, Raymond Bateman, ran against Bradley Barron for governor in 1977 and lost. And he has held the seat in the Senate for a while as well. Had a very, very narrow re-election against Lori Poppy in 2017. And now he's coming out of left field, retiring. And you have a very interesting dynamic here. Originally, Dick Zimmer and Mike Pappas, both former Republican congressmen who eventually lost re-election, were considering running. Zimmer did not run. So the Republican nominee here is actually Mike Pappas, who famously lost his congressional seat after singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Cannon Star on the House floor during the Clinton impeachment, which turned him into essentially a clown in the district, and he lost a close race. But he's coming back, not a bad candidate by any means, and certainly a race that could be a little closer than we expect. But again, we expect Zwicker to win here, which makes this seat so far the only seat that we have rated as a flip from Republican to Democratic. And again, popular incumbent, moderate, retiring, and it's going to be tough, even with a decent candidate like Pappas, to defend a seat that Republican. Because unlike the 21st, as we'll get to, you don't have a shoo-in like John Bramnick for Tom Kaine to hold the seat. Pappas just doesn't do that for Bateman.
Yeah, Pappas hasn't been in office for decades. So unfortunately, his name recognition isn't going to be as high as, like, say, like Bramnick. And in addition, you can tell by the fundraising numbers that Republicans they're trying a bit here, but they clearly have their sights set on other districts. Pappas has raised $50,000, which is like which is like your average candidate, really. Meanwhile, the Democrats have put in over $1 million in the district just to really make sure Wicker wins. Given the closeness of Bateman's victory in 2017, and he again political legacy in the district, we with an open seat and with Vicker the incumbent assemblyman running, we really think this is going to flip. It went for Murphy by 6%. So,
yeah, it's going to be obviously it's not going to vote for Zwicker by 21 points like Biden.
Yeah.
It'll be close down the ballot, single digits probably, but in the end, a single digit loss is probably the best outcome for Mike Pavas. Before I move on, just brief here. Like I said, we are going to be picking two toss-ups in the 2nd and the 8th district in the Senate. Right now, this is R to D. Depending on how we pick the 2nd district, it'll either be D to R if we pick a Mazzeo victory or a Republican hold if we pick a Palestina victory. The 8th district could be a Democratic to Republican victory if we end up picking Stanfield over Senator Adiego. However, if that race in the 8th goes to Republicans, this one goes to the Democrats, then the net gain will really be determined by how the 2nd district goes. But yeah, for now, that's interesting. We will be doing a live stream. We'll be starting at 8 o'clock, so you can join us. And we'll be hitting again. We're going to be focusing on only the races we're covering tonight, barring any other changes, just because we don't have the brain power to cover all the races. And the competitive races are the most interesting ones. But yeah, we'll move on to the 21st district. We rated this recently, actually, as leans Republican. We moved it out of the toss-up category. This seat is slightly less Democratic than the 16th district. It is Democrat plus 18. It is held by Tom Kean, the minority leader of the state Senate, who is retiring to focus on another bid against Tom Malinowski next year. He came close to beating Malinowski, only lost by about a point as Biden carried the district by 11. We're going to have to see how redistricting shapes up, which is a topic we're going to be focusing on after these elections, when Elections Daily turns our attention fully to the midterms ahead. But for now, he's trying again. And on paper, he's obviously a good candidate. He outran Trump. It'll be a competitive race against Malinowski, which is definitely going to be an interesting race, to say the least. Because Malinowski, again, the House Ethics Committee actually recently decided to continue its investigation into Malinowski and his stock trades that popped up earlier. That's all I'll say about that, because we don't want to talk about an ongoing investigation. But Kean's retiring, which has opened up an interesting race for minority leader between Singer and Orho. But again, that's also a topic for another time. The race here is different from the 16th because Republicans have a clear shoe-in candidate for Kean in John Bramnick. He's the minority leader of the state assembly in a district that currently holds all three Republican legislative leaders. And Bramnick, again, is very much, I would say, an institution like Kean in this district. This is actually my home district. I go to college in a different district, but my family lives in this district. And I can tell you that even during the Trump era, as you saw in 2019, there is a significant amount of appeal still to these down-ballot Republicans that you don't see at the federal level. And that's why people cannot judge New Jersey races by the federal level. Joe Signorello, the mayor of Roselle, he's not a bad candidate at all. He's certainly a good Democratic candidate. But again, you're running against John Bramnick. That's a tough ask. The man is going to certainly outperform expectations down the ballot. And in a similar vein to Tom Kean, that has pushed us to move it to lean Republican. Does that mean a Democratic upset is unthinkable? No. Signorello could still win. That would be a very good night for the Democrats, and certainly a collapse of down-ballot Republicanism. We're just saying it's unlikely at this point, and getting this close to the election, we're confident in saying that Bramnick will have a close race, but will come out on top as the next senator from the 21st district, which will be interesting because it should allow Nancy Munoz, who is now likely to be the senior assemblywoman, because we also think they'll hold their assembly seats here. But it will give her a chance to go from minority whip to minority leader in the assembly as well. But Ethan, go ahead.
Yeah, notably, John Bramnick was notably an anti-Trump Republican, which helped him win this district decently comfortably in 2019 after not only did the Democrats target it, but because Bramnick was anti-Trump, 2 independent Trump conservatives ran as spoilers just to sink him. Despite that, the Republicans still carried like 51% of the vote here to Democrats 47, so won by like 4 or 5 points in 2019. So Bramnick's a strong candidate. He even considered running for governor, but ultimately decided to run for Senate instead. You can tell where the power of the New Jersey Democrats lies, partially by where they're spending their money, and you can see why the South Jersey Democrats carry so much weight here. South Jersey Democrats are putting a lot of money and power into trying to flip the 2nd district, holding the 8th district, and they're actually even putting money into helping Zwicker in the 16th district. But you see the 21st district where Joe Signorello, the Democrat, is not a bad candidate, but the North Jersey Democrats, they just don't have that type of money. It seems he's got $60,000 in his campaign, plus $80,000 in his joint campaign. So they're just not putting. North Jersey Democrats just don't have as much the money firepower. There's actually one of the districts where the Republicans are heavily outspending the Democrats in the competitive district. Bramnick's raised $340,000 to Signorello $60,000. So,
and you kind of see, even though the federal trends have gone in opposite directions, in a way, you still see a little bit of that strength for Democrats in the South and Republican dominance up north, which is inverted now at the federal level, starting to become so.
Yeah, Central Jersey has the biggest Republican ticket splitting in the entire state. Even like when Cory Booker ran in 2020, you saw him do like significantly worse in the Central Jersey area than Biden. Not even to mention Malinowski. So yeah, this went Biden was 18, but only went for Murphy by 2%.
Now we're going to the final reach race, which is LD 38. Again, another race where Scharfenberger in the article from August was talking about how Richard Garcia is a good candidate. He thinks that he can very much appeal to Hispanic populations in Bergenfield, one of the big communities in the district. The incumbent here is Joe Lagana, who's from Paramus. But again, this is a safe Democratic seat, another reach target, mostly because last I checked, Garcia really hasn't been raising any money here. But this Bergen-Passaic seat hasn't been competitive since 2013, back in the Christie days.
Yeah, this could have come on board maybe if the Republicans tried. In 2019, the Democrats only won the district. I think they collectively won the district by 10 points in 2019, the assembly seats. So in a good Republican year where Republicans tried, they definitely could have made a run here. It's only Biden plus 13. But it's honestly, the Republican has raised no money. And when I say no money, I mean literally no money. So although neither side is putting any money into this district, and so we don't expect it to be competitive, we're moving into a safe Democratic.
And that's why these seats are reach. We're only mentioning them because, if it's a wave either way, they could come onto the board, not necessarily to flip, but to be competitive. But again, we just thought we'd mention them as well because Republicans are targeting them or were considering earlier on. And the final seat is the 39th district, held by Gerald Cardinale for a long time. Old state senator, passed away earlier this year, sadly. Narrow Biden district, but, like you see in 39 and 40, good Republican trends down the ballot. And Holly Schapisi, the assemblywoman there, beat fellow Assemblyman Bob Oth in a vote to become the interim senator earlier this year, then backed her own candidates against Deanne DeFuccio and Bob Oth in the assembly contest primary there. They lost. And this is a likely Republican seat down the ballot again. She's running against Ruth Dugan, who's a nonprofit executive. But again, expect this seat to remain in the Republican column.
Yeah, we mentioned this last time. Holly Schapisi really made a terrific political move in challenging Gerald Cardinale before he unfortunately died. Yeah. Because otherwise, this seat was likely going to be going to Bob Oth instead, the other assemblyman. Because she made her moves organizing behind the scenes, gathering allies right before he died. She was able to use that leverage to get herself appointed the interim senator, and she's probably going to win. The Democrats' fundraising here actually isn't that bad, but we don't. If they're doing bad in seats like the 21st, it's going to be hard to see them carry a district at the 39th. Where in 2019, the Republican Assembly members won the district by a combined 9.5%. So, like even in 21st, Bramnick and Munoz only won by 5% collectively. So it's a tough district for Democrats, and we think Republicans will hold it.
Yep. And that concludes the Senate.
Before we conclude, I think we did miss the 25th district.
Oh, yeah, I skipped it. That was my bad. Yeah, the 25th is another interesting one. It was held by Tony Bucco Sr., who passed away. His son ran for the seat, won a special election on the same night, showing some perfect classic North Jersey ticket splitting. On the same night that Biden won the seat by 9, he won it by about 10, took 54% of the vote against former Assembly candidate Rupande Mehta. And he's now being challenged by Jeff Grazel, who's a Morris Township committeeman. We rate this seat as lean Republican, but it'll probably go to likely Republican before the actual general election. Similar reasoning to 39 here. Again, if Democrats aren't doing well in 21, they're not going to win this seat because it's significantly more Republican at the top line.
Yeah. All the Republicans here aren't as strong as, say, Bramnick, but it's also a less Democratic seat. So in 2019, when Democrats heavily targeted this district, the Republicans collectively won by 5%. And we saw what happened even in the presidential year, where R. Dunn won the open assembly seat by 4%. Tony Bucco won it by 8%. And in an off-year election where you might expect people to more focus on state issues, and so where you might expect a down ballot Republicanism in this area to be even more pronounced, it's going to be hard for Democrats to have a chance here.
Yeah, certainly. And since we already talked about the Senate races, in terms of funding and the way the campaigns are targeted, these closely align with the assembly races. So for the interest of time, so we can get to some county level races, I'm just going to run through quickly all the assembly races, and then Ethan can provide some feedback at the end. The 2nd and 8th districts are toss-ups for the assembly, just like the Senate. Again, big spending, top targets for the assembly committees for both parties. As you know, each seat elects 2 assembly members, both of whom are usually of the same party, traditionally. The second, and we use the same districts, as I mentioned, for Assembly and Senate. So the 2nd district, Assembly, John Armato is running for re-election. Vince Mazzio is running for Senate. So the Democratic running mate is Karen Fitzpatrick, who's one of the Atlantic County Commissioners, which is just the new name for freeholder. The Republican candidates here are credible. The former Deputy Attorney General of the state, Claire Swift, is one of them. The other is Dawn Guardian, who won Atlantic City as a Republican and is now the mayor. 3rd district, the Sweeney seat. In the Assembly, similarly uncompetitive, likely Democratic. Assemblymen Berzichelli and Taliaferro are expected to win re-election against their Republican challengers. 8th district, as we mentioned, a toss-up. Both Republican incumbents are retiring here. Gene Stanfield to run for Senate and Ryan Peters to focus more on his family. Republicans recruited some credible candidates here as well. Businessman Mike Teresi and Lumberton Township Administrator Brandon Umba, I'm not sure how he pronounces it. Democrats are regurgitating Mike Natali, who is, I believe, the Evesham Municipal Chair for the Democratic Party there, and then Allison Eckel, who's a school board member. Still a close race. The 11th, one of the only differences, lean Democratic. We view it as slightly better for the Republicans than the Senate race in the 11th. Incumbents Joanne Downey and Eric Hotaling are running for re-election there. The 16th, Roy Fryman, who succeeded Jack Chittarelli, is running for re-election. Also on the ticket is Sadaf Jaffer, and she is running to fill the spot of Andrew Zwicker, who is retiring to run for president. Sorry, I don't know why I just said that. To run for Senate, not president.
Andrew Zucker for
My bad.
president.
That's the first mistake I've made tonight. Oh God, I'm sorry about that, folks. Maybe he will run for president. Who knows?
Oh God.
But the 21st, John Bramnick's retiring to run for Senate. Munoz is now going to be the senior on that ticket. And Michelle Matsakudis also running. This is a lean Republican race. The 25th District Assembly people, Berrigan and Dunn, running for re-election, also lean Republican. And the 39th, Assemblyman Auth and Assemblywoman DeFuccio, who was appointed earlier this year after Schapisi was elevated to the Senate, also running in a lean Republican race. So you have a little bit of difference between the Senate top line, but ultimately, I would say it's a safe bet that these assembly races are going to vote very similarly to their Senate counterparts. Any thoughts before we move on to county office?
Nothing in particular.
Okay.
But yeah, they're all mostly the same. We don't expect too much differences.
Yeah. So briefly, there's only one competitive sheriff's election this year. It's in Gloucester County. And even then, it's not tremendously competitive. The incumbent Democratic Sheriff Carmel Marina is running for re-election. He was first elected in 2006. We rate this as likely Democratic. Gloucester is a close county on paper, but it has some Democratic strength down ballot, even though it was, again, only voting for Biden by about 2 points. But he's being challenged by the same Republican as last time, Jonathan Salmons. He won with about 57% last time. But, this is the only one that's even remotely competitive. The other sheriff's contests are in completely safe localities. We have one competitive county clerk's election in Atlantic County. The incumbent Ed Mcgettigan, as we'll get into later, essentially had a big screw up, a big oops moment. And he is retiring after that for being vociferously criticized. He won easily last time. He's been the county clerk there for a very long time, since 2006. But you've got a close race shaping up between Joseph Girallo, the Republican, and Lisa Giampetti, the Democrat. We currently rate it as leans Democratic, but to be honest with you, a Republican could win here. They've got a close at-large commissioner race in the county as well that we'll talk about. But I'm going to get into why Mcgettigan retired and why the Democrats here are somewhat tarnished later when we get to the commissioner race that is the subject of why Mcgettigan had to retire as county clerk. And county surrogate, we have one close race in Burlington. Burlington, a lot like Somerset, it's a Democratic county at the state and federal level, but Republicans have traditionally had strength here down the ballot, although it has gradually been chipped away, kind of like someone sculpting a sculpture, just chipping away at the stone, if you will. But Republicans have some hope that they can make races close in Burlington, and this is one of them. Incumbent surrogate Marianne O'Brien resigned to become to become a Superior Court judge. Murphy appointed her. So you have a race between a Republican named Deborah Busby Cope and Democrat Brian Carlin. On paper, the county leans Democratic. We're rating it as leans Democratic. But again, out of an abundance of caution, Republicans could win the surrogate race. And you never know if it's a big Republican year. They could see some resurgence in races in counties like Burlington and Somerset down the ballot, even though it remains unlikely. Finally, we're going to get into commissioner races. There are 3 different sets of commissioner races up this year. And for those who haven't heard, commissioner is the new word for freeholder. So it's now the board of elected commissioners, not the board of chosen freeholders. The county commissioners now, as they're called. But no other changes. We'll talk about Atlantic County first, and we're only looking at competitive ones. Atlantic County has 2 toss-up races for its county commission this year. The first one is an at-large race, meaning it's the entire county. So along with the county clerk race, it is one of 2 competitive races countywide in Atlantic. And the former sheriff of Atlantic County, Frank Bales, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but he was appointed to the Board of County Commissioners, and he's running for re-election here. We rank it as a toss-up. He's being challenged by Celeste Fernandez, the Democrat, And this race, since he's the incumbent, although he hasn't been elected, could be even closer than our county clerk's race here. But the more interesting race is in the 3rd district. And Atlantic does its county commission, or previously board of freeholders, by district, which is unusual. Normally it's different classes of at-large elected commissioners. But in this case, they have a set of at-large and then by district. So this is the 3rd district, which is a very competitive one. And it's vacant. So last November, they held the regularly scheduled election for this district between a Republican named Andrew Parker and a Democrat named Thelma Witherspoon. And Witherspoon ended up theoretically winning the election with about 50% of the vote. Really, really close race, only decided by 280 votes or something insane like that. Now, we get back to Atlantic County Clerk Ed Mcgettigan, who's retiring this year. He sent out, as county clerk, or approved the sending out of 500 ballots that did not have this county commissioner race on the ballot. So 500 ballots went out in this district, but did not have the office listed as an office for which voters could vote. And it was decided by 200 votes. So he was so vociferously criticized that he was pushed into retirement. And that has dogged the Dem campaign to hold the clerk's office there. But there's a redo election. They're redoing the very close election from last time as a special election this year. Same candidates. We have it as a toss-up. It could go either way. I don't even know if we'll make a pick here. It'll be one to watch, though. One of 2 interesting races for the Atlantic County Commission. The second at-large commission race comes in Monmouth. Traditionally Republican down the ballot. Has been getting closer federally, but again, you typically have strong statewide or countywide elected office holders here. Kim Guadagno, before she was lieutenant governor, Sheriff Sean Golden, prospective governor candidate before Chitterelli and before Steinhardt dropped out. But Susan Kiley is running here, and she won a split race last time. We rated as likely Republican. This is a race that we expect to go to the Republicans, but it's not out of the realm of competitiveness. Similar situation in Burlington. As we said, Republicans do want to try and contest Burlington and get back at it, essentially, but the freeholder race there follows the more traditional format in New Jersey for a county commission race of having 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, a lot like assembly races. They're in slates, and the slate is elected to that class of the Board of Commissioners. I'm sorry if I slip in freeholder there. It's going to take a while to get used to the change in name. But in Burlington, Republicans are nominating John Adams and Albert Pallanti against incumbent commissioners Felicia Hobson and Daniel O'Connell. We rate it as likely Democratic. Republicans can make it a close race if they have a good year, but the Democrats should be fine in Burlington. Cumberland County, again, a county Phil Murphy did well in last time with some down-ballot Democratic strength. The incumbents, one of them is retiring. They're both Democrats. We expect it to be close, but leans Democratic for Commissioner Joseph Durella Jr. and the new Democratic nominee for the other spot on the slate, Priscilla Ocasio-Jimenez. The Gloucester race leans Democratic also. We expect incumbents Robert Dominger and James Lavender to be able to James Lavender's retiring. So Robert Dominger and Denise DiCarlo, we expect to hold those commissioner seats for the Democrats. For Republicans in Hunterdon County, again, getting closer federally, but we expect Republican commissioners Matthew Holt and Suzanne Soloway to be reelected, likely Republican rating there. In Salem County, leans Republican rating, but we expect Ben Laurie and Mickey Ostrom, the incumbents, to be reelected. And finally, in Somerset, a county where you've seen state or countywide Republicans just have a downfall over the last few years. We're going to have the first chance as county Republicans to see if we can flip. To see if they can flip the commissioner's seat for Class 3 back. So you have 2 seats here. These were actually the first to go in 2018. Chanel Robinson and Sarah Soy beat the Republican incumbents in 2018. And now Republicans are going to see if they can win back the seats. I don't expect them to. It's leans Democratic, but if it's a good night for Republicans in New Jersey, they should be able to make it close in Somerset. You have to remember, even though there have been losses for Somerset and Burlington Republicans, particularly Somerset, they've been very narrow. The large freeholder race here in 2020, Freeholder Walsh, the Republican, lost by literally half a point. In 2018, Robinson and Suey beat Republican incumbents very, very narrowly, and the other slated Republican commissioner incumbents lost narrowly in 2019 also. The sheriff in Somerset and the county clerk also lost narrowly. Only the county surrogate lost by a wide margin, and that was last year. So the writing might be on the wall, but, Republicans might want to take a chance with Michael Kirsch and Amber Murad and see, can we gain back some ground at all in Somerset County? And finally, in Morris County, which is unique for having three commissioner incumbents instead of two, all three incumbents, John Cricket, Stephen Shaw, and Deborah Smith, will be running for re-election. Morris is starting to break at the federal level for Democrats, but you have to remember, down ballot, still good for Republicans. Currently, it's lean Republican, and we expect all three Republican commissioners to hold their seats in a close race. So, Ethan, do you have any thoughts about any of these county races at all?
I'll be honest, I have not been paying as much attention to these, but we'll have to see. A lot of these sometimes come down to like a lot of local issues and more local to races. So, but yeah, for county commissioner, we'll have to see. Maybe Republicans can snatch back a seat in Somerset after getting locked out, despite being. I think they held like every single Somerset county commissioner office.
They held the whole state government, the whole countywide government, and they've effectively lost it.
They've lost every single one in the Trump era. So, rip to them.
Yeah, but we'll have to see if they can gain back. I mean, again, they had close elections. I mean, the clerk's office, and again, that's a one-on-one race. Clerk's office was very close in 2017. Sheriff's race was close in 2018. And even last time in 2020, they had an at-large county commissioner race, really, really close, as I mentioned. So,
Yep. Have you been paying attention to any local races or?
We don't have any on our key race list, but you're welcome to talk about some.
Not the key races, obviously. Just like just some fun things. Because they're the one I've been looking at.
And talk about them. We have some extra time. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have some extra time. I'd like to just quickly give a shout out to Brick Township in Ocean County. You know about this one?
I do know about Brick. It's a great place.
Very fun place. This Brick
Jersey
Township,
Shore is a national treasure.
Yep. Now, a fun fact about Brick Township, which went for Trump by let me make sure I get this correct. I believe it's like 24 points. But
after this, we have to talk about Lakewood.
Oh, and Lakewood. Actually, start with Lakewood while I look up the stats.
Yeah, but just for a brief thing about Lakewood, as you know, it is the Trump Center, very Orthodox Jewish community, highly populated. It used to be, for the Singer Senate seat, it used to be small enough to where they could put Toms River and Lakewood in the same district, but they've seen such a population boom, they can't do that. But suffice to say, Phil Murphy easily won it last time, blowout. And
he won by 1%.
VOD, and the VOD there has endorsed Phil Murphy again, highly influential Orthodox Jewish community. And it's impacted the race for minority leader as well, because you have a bunch of Republican senators saying that Senator Singer, who wants to be minority leader with Kane on the way out, is going to be beholden to that community of interest that is supporting Murphy. And Murphy only won by like 51-47 in Lakewood last time, but we're talking a Trump blowout in Lakewood. So very interesting.
Yeah. Murphy narrowly carried Lakewood last time, and all indications are he has a decent chance of doing it again, despite going like Trump plus 50 or something. Or actually, no. Let's look at. I have the actual stat here. Yeah, it went Trump plus 65. Trump was 65, but had a giant swing to the right from 2016. But Murphy very well could carry again because the Orthodox Jews vote as a bloc.
That is true.
Yeah. But anyway, that's someone's behind me.
What are you talking about with Brick before we sign off?
Oh yeah. So yeah, Brick Township is the one I like to look at. So this district won for Republicans in 20 in 2020 by 24 points. So pretty red township over here. But notably, their entire state government is run by Democrats. That's first. The reason for this is a bit complicated. They've always had a few Democrats on their county commission on the council, but currently their entire city council and their mayor is a Democrat, conservative Democrats, but the Democrats, to be clear. Their mayor being John Ducey. Republicans have been, for some reason, Republicans have been completely locked out of state government here. Apparently, I looked into it. Apparently, because they screwed up with red light cameras and other mismanagement and other corruption scandals back early in the 2010s. So John Ducey's up for re-election this year, and we're trying to see if Republicans can finally regain some footholds in this district where they've been locked out of. For some context, this town has become so hostile to Republicans in the local level that one of the Democratic city councilmen flipped parties in 2018 to endorse Bob Hugin for the Senate race in New Jersey, and then got his butt kicked the next year in the legislative race, in the city council races. I think he got the lowest vote margin of any candidate, and the Democrats retook unanimous control of the city council in 2019. So yeah, this is just one of those funny local quirks I'm looking at.
Yeah, and again, even in my hometown in Warren, which actually for the first time voted narrowly for Joe Biden last time around, was like Romney plus 26. Still expect strong Republican down ballot trends. The day that my town votes out the Republicans' town government, essentially, is the day the whole thing burns down and sinks into the earth and blows up. A Biden plus one victory is not indicative of a sweep for Democrats down ballot. But yeah, with that, we're very happy to conclude this stream. You'll hear from me again. I'm going to be writing up a final article, a couple short paragraphs on each of these races that are big, governor's race, and we'll be sending that out shortly before the election. And you'll see the two of us again, excited to cover New Jersey and get our returns. So if you recognize that New Jersey is better than Virginia, nobody cares about Virginia, then come here and watch the New Jersey stream on November 2nd at 8 p.m. for the real interesting Jersey action. And we'll be happy to guide you through the night with some expert commentary and analysis of the results. Until then, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to our Elections Daily community, and thank you to everybody involved in the New Jersey political team. So I cited a couple people tonight. Joey Fox, new political reporter for the New Jersey Globe, where I did an internship. David Wildstein, obviously great guy, great mentor to me as well journalistically. And Mike Rasmussen does the Rider University Rebovich Institute for Politics, which is the big thing in New Jersey. So thank you, and good night, everybody.
Yep.